Hello, I'm Peter Reynolds, Industry Principal with ARC Advisory Group, and I'm pleased to have Lawrence Schwartz with us today. Lawrence is Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer with Aspen Technology. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be back with you and to have these conversations, albeit virtually this year.
Thanks very much. Yeah, glad to have you. Yeah. So tell me, Lawrence, AspenTech has had quite a busy year. Can you summarize AspenTech's big developments since we last talked at the ARC Industry Forum back in 2020 when we could travel?
Yeah, no kidding. It's a lot has gone on in the past year, and especially for us, we've had a really big focus on what we're calling industrial AI and a lot of developments there. And so we actually had one of our biggest launch in years with our newest version of software, our V12, and that's had a couple of focus areas for us. One is we've introduced hybrid models into the marketplace, which is very exciting for us. This lets customers embed AI into their applications and really lets you take machine learning and AI and combine that with domain expertise and first principles and have a really unique offering for the market. So we've been excited about that. We've supported that as well with the launch of what we call our AIoT Hub. So this provides all the data integration, cloud infrastructure, virtualization, visualization, and ecosystem to deploy AI. So that's been another area of focus. And then we've talked in a lot of conferences and events about our direction of going towards the self-optimizing plant, as a future vision. And we actually came to the market with V12 with our Aspen Unified, which brings together planning and scheduling and makes that a more cohesive opportunity for our customers. So a lot going on from the product side. And then we've been active in a few smaller acquisitions as well. And just to give you a flavor, one of them is Camo Analytics. They provide all this industrial analytics, which can actually be targeted to pharma and biotech, which, as you know, has a lot of overlap between Industry 4.0 and Pharma 4.0. So we're excited to have more solutions in that space, particularly around analytics for quality in that area. So very, very busy year for us, amongst other things.
Right. Yeah. So interesting. So you touched upon something that I think is quite interesting. Lawrence, you mentioned something called industrial AI. And
yeah.
Not just regular AI or artificial intelligence. So what's the difference? Is this just analytics? Isn't this vanilla AI? What makes something truly, or what makes AI truly industrial?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a couple of pieces to it. One is from the technology side, right? So there's a lot of tools and opportunities for customers to go out to the market now and just kind of get the basic toolkits that they need to do analysis and AI and machine learning, right? So that's generally available. But how do you think about applying that to our space, particularly the process industry, and do that in an effective manner? And so from a technology standpoint, we're doing some interesting capabilities where you take those basic AI and you add on the domain expertise that we have, particularly the first principles models, and apply those as well. And now you're not just doing generic AI, but you're doing things that have mass balance in them, right? And make sure those equations are met, right? That they meet the physical constraints that you have. And so it's a different take on it. And when you think about from a customer standpoint of our customers looking at and interested and willing to adopt AI, there's a couple of things that they would look at with industrial AI that are very different, right? One is, with industrial AI, can you leverage your existing investments, right? That becomes important. So can they leverage the tools that they use from us today, HYSYS, Aspen Plus? We make that easy. Can it be done safely, right? And by putting these boundaries on here, right, you can actually have something that can be deployed safely in the process industry, right? So that's another area. Is the AI that you have, is it scalable? Can you run it not just in one part of your business, but can you scale it for, a reduced order model across all your enterprise? And that makes something industrial as well. Can you have a quick time to value with it? Do you need an army of data scientists, or can you really get going with the process experts that you have today? And then the last area that makes something in our minds really an industrial AI solution is, can it tackle some of the big problems that companies are facing today around sustainability, right? And we see that happening. We've got customers already using our industrial AI solutions to go after there and build hybrid models for example, in plastic production, right, you have to reduce look at the grade transitions when you bring things out and go between different lines. And if you can reduce that time, have much less waste, and have better models to do that, not only do you save a lot of money, a couple $100,000 a year or so per line, but you can actually have a lot less waste too. So I look at this as, can you really go about this with a full solution that customers can deploy and take advantage of, particularly in our industries around the process space.
That's interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about the pandemic a little
Sure.
bit. We don't like to talk about the pandemic. So, it's certainly been on everybody's, mind in the last year. And many asset owner companies have, they've done really well at embracing digital, but the pandemic has really exposed a lot of the weaknesses in supply chains, and especially the human supply chain. And I think about what you said about the self-optimizing plant, because I think that's really important going forward. So from your point of view, how can digitalization help companies who are still dealing with the effects of COVID-19? And the second question I really have related to that is, how will it benefit companies as the restrictions start lifting?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question, because we're all still, or most countries are still in the middle of this and trying to work through it and think about where we go in the future. First of all, there's a lot of things that everybody's doing, and our situations, right? We're in the advantage of, we can work remotely. A lot of companies are doing that in kind of the office space. But then, how do you enable companies to have that flexibility to do things remotely, right, within a plant? Setting up things like multivariate control, right, when you don't necessarily want to have everybody in the plant. So we've been able to help customers with some of those basic type of challenges. One of the things that's important is to be agile in this environment and to really have a lot of flexibility in what you can produce. And we work with one refiner in a country, which is, I think, symbolic of what you see happening is, they traditionally had a mix of, jet fuel and diesel fuel that they're kind of looking to put out to the market. As you can imagine, jet fuel usage and consumption's way down, and they want to shift that over. They have been shifting that over to diesel fuel, because transportation and getting supplies out is still very critical. And we can make that planning and scheduling flip, much more flexible for them and give them that. And then the other thing you see companies also looking at is kind of doing that optimization, trade-off. If you think of it as a dial, right? When you really need to get output out, right, you can kind of flip the optimization, the process controls that we do, and help customers maximize production if kind of the volume is your number one priority. But if you're producing less, right, under the short term, how do you actually turn the dial to make sure you can really target, quality and less waste, right, in the production environment? And that way, even if you're shipping less, right, you have less waste and more efficiency, and you can still maintain good margins on what you're putting out there. So I think giving companies those types of flexibilities has been really important during the pandemic. And going forward, having those implemented, having that digitalization in their system gives them much more flexibility for, as the dial goes back to normal, right, they can kind of continue to shift back to normal operations. And some of these efficiencies that they've learned, they can apply, to other big challenges that they're looking at too, like, how do I shift over and think about my processes when I'm more concerned about sustainability and other matters. So we give them more of that flexibility over time.
So it brings me to my next question. As companies, start to move from thinking about near-time challenges, such as what to do with all of the fuel oil, or with the jet fuel that they have in their facility, or as chemical companies move from more strategic products, right? So certainly they shouldn't lose sight of longer-term goals as well, like those around sustainability. And with the Davos meetings, underway this week, since certainly sustainability and the environment are top of mind for a lot of companies as we move past, COVID-19 and the pandemic. So can you tell us how AspenTech is helping customers achieve sustainability goals?
Absolutely. And you're right, there's been a lot of action around this, certainly with the change in administration in the US, right, looking at getting back into the Paris climate accords as well. And an interesting thing here is, by some studies from the International Energy Agency, right, they talk about what are the different ways to reduce emissions? And a large part of that, depending on the industry, up to 40% can come from efficiency, right? And those are the areas that we as a company can help customers think about. And I know we did a study with ARC about a year ago, and we looked at, what are the different ways that sustainability can be addressed. And a lot of these digital technologies, supply chain optimization, APC, digital twin, right? Those all floated to the top, right? So I think we're seeing that capability and that interest with customers of how they use what they have today and think about kind of turning the dial in a different fashion. So I think in some ways it's about understanding the problem. So we've worked with companies. I'll give you one example. Bharat Petroleum, they're out there and they use our HYSYS, our modeling, to give you or to give themselves a refinery-wide emission model that they can look at. They can look at their emissions from all the different sources in the refinery, the heaters, the boilers, and they can do that at a very frequent basis and use that information, write it back to the historians, look at trends, look at errors, and ultimately, figure out, how they can optimize for emission in real time as well as production, right? So kind of look at both of those. So you see it happening there. And then the other area, so you talk about, decarbonization, right? And that's one focus. The other one that we're seeing a lot of discussions around is, what do we do about overall sustainability in the circular economy? And one big step we did as a company, actually just last month, is we joined the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And that's a large consortium between many of the global chemical companies. They've committed over $1 billion to look at ways of how do you keep plastic out of the environment, right? And we actually joined as the first enabler company, meaning that we can help supply technology and those types of resources to help them with some of those objectives. And it's interesting when you look at the ways to do that. There's long-term things that you could do. You think about how much recycling happens today and how much actually gets recycled, right? And not nearly as much as we need to. And so are there new ways to do that? Going from mechanical recycling to more of chemical recycling, if you will. And then the other thing is, a lot of the things that people are doing today with like supply chain can be reoriented to look at efficiency. So we work with a large company that does food containers in Japan, right? And they have all their logistics of how do they get that to all their different stores. But they also want to look at how they collect that, what they use, the bento boxes and other things to the stores to deliver food. How do they collect that back efficiently and then reuse it? Well, that becomes a supply chain question, right? How you not just optimize it for performance, but how do you optimize it to collect that back efficiently? And once you do that, you can actually have a lot less waste going to the environment, as well as the savings and efficiency you get otherwise. So a lot of the things that we're doing now, I've always had that in mind, and they can use that and bring that to the forefront for their particular needs.
Well, Lawrence, thank you very much for being with us today. We'll be looking forward to watching AspenTech's progress in the coming months. And today we've been speaking with Lawrence Schwartz, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer with Aspen Technology. And for ARC Advisory Group, I'm Peter Reynolds. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Peter. Pleasure to be here.